Good morning. Our group is made up of Karen Rodríguez, David Felipe Hill, and Alejandro Urquijo, and we are going to present the Chapter A, Process and Procedure of the Grounded Theory book.
Rational and motivation. One topic that is often ignored in discussion of grounded theory methods is the initial rationale and motivation for the research to be undertaken. Some publications reporting the findings illustrate this form of personal statement. This provides a welcome trend in research publication that doesn't treat research as robotic and neutral data collectors and analyzers, but rather aims to focus on their distinctive roles and form of participation, engagement, and positionality. Grounded theory is currently used around the world, mainly for doctoral theses and research. Grounded theory opens up a completely new world of theory and knowledge generation. It is used by professionals such as academics in health, management, social work, political science, business, and sociology. No preconceived research works like grounded theory, but the worldwide use of grounded theory has increased our understanding of not use prior concepts or giving the arguments to preconceived aspects of research in some way. Suspend preconceived ideas. Keep in mind that preconceptions shouldn't be forgotten. They will only be suspended for grounded theory research so that the researcher is open to the emergent. Glaser advised that there is as little or as little preconception as possible rather than no preconception. But this isn't really helpful for doctorate students and other research because it doesn't compromise with the nature of people preconceptions and the ways in which these must be articulated, confront, and addressed rather than being pushed aside the way Glaser does. Some researchers believe that guide of other research can damage the investigation and claim that having too much a priori theoretical orientation can prevent a research from seeing what is and what isn't really significant. Keynes said, practical men who believe they are exempt from any intellectual influence are usually slaves of some diseased economists. In other words, it is far better to try to recognize one's initial ideas than to dismiss them in this way. Research who omit any reference to them may be the most affected by them. Understanding and perception. In both cases, the implication is that researchers can somehow gain unrestricted access to the data or phenomena if they can remove such impediments. This form of argumentation depends on the possibility that researchers can identify and articulate their preconceptions and then somehow ignore them. Thomas Kuhn said that we are able to gain understanding of what is happening and thus develop new perceptions precisely because of our preconceptions. Different people preconceptions can lead to new perceptions or a shift from one paradigm to another. Innovating insights arise precisely from someone seeing things differently, based on a different set of preconceptions, and not because they have not preconceptions. Conclusion: preconceived ideas. We must suspend them so that they don't affect our research. However, we can keep them in mind or some of other theories to if it's necessary to contextualize the situation. But the most important thing is that they never interfere with our investigation.
The current speech becomes an essential moment in the analysis process through Grinder theory that this stage involves performing the open inquiry processes, actual and selective, forcing the researcher to carry out an analytical and descriptive examination of the data, listening to the interviews through reading and reviewing the text to recognize what they say and how they are presenting their speech. Open coverage. In its mode of querying, the researcher learns to remain open to any idea that may originate from data, also highlighting that the query carried out does not only revolve around the textual data with which one works, but also with respect to the experience and review of the literature of the research problem. According Strauss and Corbin, the purpose is to group or classify into categories events, objects, and actions or interactions that are casually similar in nature or related in meaning due to their ability to represent phenomena because they share common characteristics, meaning that alone tend to be grouped. Axial current. According to Strauss and Corbin, axial current it relates to the process of regrouping the data that was fractured during open current to argue that it will be necessary to relate the categories and subcategories through sentence that denote their link, and it is also important to try to find clues in the text that allow the main categories to be related to each other. The subcategories provide an guided explanatory force of the phenomenon with which they are associated because they try to answer questions who, as, when, where, why, how, and with what consequence this phenomenon occurs. Selective current. The selective current is the process by which all previously identified categories are reunified again a core category, which represent the main phenomenon being studied. But Gleason and Strauss wanted to offer an alternative, and they offer the kinds of questions that should be asked early in the investigation. That is this data about? What is this a story of? What's going on? What's people doing? what people say? These are very questions, so it is worth offering more back ground to each one, but is should the note that these are my own expositions from other rings. What is this data about? The research orientation must allow chance and surprise. This is what the open-minded researchers means. What are these data starting about? Researchers have found that data collected did perhaps a problem of idea in mind leans elsewhere, as the analysis found evoking unexpected results. What's going on? Researchers should not assume that people say or speak are the central or primary activities. What are people going? This implies not only asking people about what they do and also about what they think other people doing, but also observing people's action and interactions. That's building a model of the social processes that constitute the investigated scenario. What people say, they need to investigate them more deeply again, taking a special view of what people say and why they really mean and what they omit.
I would like to begin by saying that, in addition to the other questions, there are many more that need to be asked in the early stage of the investigation. These questions are additional and even incorporate the articulation of a constructivist and reflective description of the grounded theory. Charmas proposed several questions that help to sensitize researchers to the wide variety of point of view of the research participants. That is, understand that there are different perspectives on things and the context that is developing. To do this, it is necessary to know the main structure and context in which the research topic is developed. In addition, the role played by power and control, among others, must be taken into account. Charman's most common questions are: how do researchers maintain a balance between the data and their own experience? How does the involvement of the researcher have an impact on the setting and interaction of the actors themselves? And finally, how do structure and context serve to support, maintain, impede, or change this context? In several aspects, these questions are similar to those that people involved in activities such as organizational redesign should ask themselves when they try to have an immediate impact of the context. The theoretical coding of Glaser. They are association of codes that are related to each other. It can be due to the topic, the process, the time, the degree of relationships, the causes, the consequence, among others. Through the grouping into families that Glaser raises, the process of synthesis and integration of data into theoretical concepts that we have been talking about is facilitated. In addition, this coding allows the researcher to observe the discovery of new families of codes or to reinterpret what already exists through his own research process. Glaser proposed 18 families of taking which guide the researcher in the process of synthesis of the grounded theory criteria, having as a characteristic the interaction between them. One of the most relevant is the family of the 6 C's. It is considered the most important for the formulation of theoretical codes, and it is the first to be carried out. What Glaser tries on with the 6 C's is to find the causes, context, consequences, contingencies, covariances, and conditions. Another relevant family is the process family. It goes in search of phases, progressions, or transitions. It consists in that, in the search for a process, at least two stages must be identified. Since a process is a way of grouping two related parts of a phenomenon or an event that happens over time. The grade family seeks to identify issues such as limit, grade, or intensity, making it necessary to have relevant grades within the central category of the research, which is oriented as a search guide. Finally, the type family indicates complete variations in the combination of categories. Since these can be dimensions which look for different types, shape, classes, styles, or schemes to carry out the investigation. The students. Some doctoral students have used grounded theory and strategy related to Charmas and Glaser have been used. To begin with, Yoda based his research on initial motivation drawn from his own background and experience within the tax systems in his country of origin. His starting point was to study the role of the deployment of information and communication technologies, or ICT, in tax systems, based on his previous experience as an audit and evaluation officer. Jode divided his initial interviews in three groups of people. First, the tax administration responsible for the introduction and deployment of ICTs in the tax system. Second, the evaluation and audit personnel who are responsible for using and benefiting from ICT applications in the performance of their work and duties. And finally, the local community that benefits from electronic services through the deployment of ICT in the tax system. Yoda based his interviews on WH questions such as what, how, when, among others, and in expressions such as explain this to me, tell me about this, among others, in order to further develop the research topic to have a more general context of the topic using strategies from Glaser and Charmas. Unlike Yoda, Gerard Drexler offers an example of a slightly different approach, since the interviews were carried out on 3 occasions, 11 at the beginning, 9 during selective coding, and finally 3 additional to fight the theoretical saturation. Also, he used focus groups in the early stage, helping to reinforce the topics, since they were categorized and reorganized until the results was satisfactory in terms of integrity and structure. Gamache had already collected much of their data before opting to use GTM, so their strategy was different. The data sources were 5 locations in Asia. The main interest was in a program focused on the development of telecenters in rural localities related to ICT. The interviews were semi-structured rather than the more open from favore in the GTM literature. The key was to be completely frank about her methodological development and to use her theoretical insight and sensitivity in the analysis stage. Once she developed the initial codes from this data, she went on to repeat the process with one of the 4 remaining sites. Students' starting points. Finally, it is necessary to compare the different strategies that the doctoral students used to begin their research. Gerard Drexler offers clear contextual statement based on his experience and concerns developing from practice and expertise. Premila Gamache did not start research with the grounded theory method GTM in mind. Ibrahim Yoda, similar in some regards to Drexler, took up GTM from the start and followed it rigorously, but note the initial set of questions used in getting started. This suggests that any method can be used in a research project and adapt to the purpose of grounded theory. Gamache did not directly use the grounded theory, according to this book, or in this canonical form, but it produced significant results.